My goodness.
Talk no more, none of that shit. I'm just doing the same.
Quick release.
Let's go, eight.
Got me started. Wrist frames carded. Pull up double parking. Don't even pay like I'm the owner. My young niggas retarded.
Yo, what up, guys? We're on the clock. It's Caleb. Got Julian back in the fold, and today we're joined by a special guest. We got Rafael Barlowe from the Lockdown Podcast Network. How are we doing, Rafael? It's good to have you.
Yeah, man, I'm good. How are you guys doing? Actually, before that, props to you guys. I remember when you told me that you were going to do this, start the podcast, and you actually did it. You know, there's a lot of people that say, I want to do this. I want to start a podcast. I want to cover the draft. And they keep stalling themselves out and delaying. There's a guy that I've been talking to for like 2 years about starting a podcast. He's always reaching out to me, asking me for questions. And I'm just like, dude, just do it. Just start it. It's not going to be great your first time around. And, you know, for you guys being young, and you said that's something that you wanted to do, you went out and did it. So big props to you guys.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I mean, of course, I have to thank you as well for the inspiration and the, you know, always well wishes and kind words of wisdom. So, you know, you're a great guy, and we're happy to have you on. And obviously we've come a long way. We're almost 3/4 of the way to 100 episodes, which is saying a lot. Like 2 years ago, I think, is when we made that initial connection, about like maybe a year and a half ago.
Yep.
So it's been a long way. So I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, no problem.
All the positive and nice sentiments aside, we do have a task at hand, and I'm excited to talk about the SEC and kind of the talent, more specifically coming into the conference this year, because we all are draft junkies, as some of us would say. And, you know, just want to keep it focused on the kind of the draft perspective for this first part. Me and Julian will kind of break down the rest of the conference later on in the podcast. But while we have you, Rafael, I, of course, want to ask you about some of these young guys coming into Kentucky. They got another, you know, number one recruiting class. And there's some names here that, I mean, I'm just curious to pick your brain on. And I think we have to start with Justin Edwards. And I'll kind of let Julian take the lead on this one, see if he can't frame some questions that he has about Justin Edwards at you. Because, I mean, from a playmaking and a scoring perspective, what he can do with the ball in his hands, he's the type of guy that could develop into a number one scoring option. I know you agree with me, Julian, on that point.
Yeah. No, sorry, go, Raph.
No, I was just sorry to cut you off. I was saying I like him. I did a podcast a couple of days ago with my brother, and my brother just doesn't see it. We ended up having like this mini argument debate on the last podcast, but he just does not see the vision with Justin Edwards. He thinks he is a top 10 pick, but he doesn't think he should be mentioned as a number one guy. He questions his shooting, but I'm like, the guy does everything well. He can do everything. I mean, he's number one on my big board right now. So I'm obviously high on him.
Mm-hmm.
But,
I guess to frame that question to you, do you think that he is the type of guy that you spend to pick on, with it being in mind that he's your number one or two scoring option down the road?
Possibly. I mean,
we still have a lot to see, obviously. Well,
and honestly, when you look at like the draft, right? There's only going to be like 30 number one options in the NBA, and then sometimes you may have a couple guys that could be number one options on the same team, like Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. Honestly, I think that he could be like a really, really good, maybe second option. I don't see like number one option right now, but that's just because I don't think this is a particularly strong class where you're going to get that number one option. I think if he has a good year, I think even if he were in like 2024, I can't really see him having a season. I can't see him having a season in 2024 that would have pushed him to be a top 5 pick in 2023. Mm-hmm. And he's the same age as some of those guys. So, I mean, I think he can be a 2 or maybe even a 3 on a really, really good team. But just looking at this class, I just don't see many guys that are going to be number one options as of today.
Yeah, I hear that, and I would agree. I think I see him as like being that secondary creator, somebody who can create shots off the catch, ideally, with the kind of the way the spacing's working out in the NBA now. I guess that raises into the question: how confident are you in his catch and shoot ability? Kind of playing off ball. He's going to have that opportunity, and we'll talk about some of the other guys at Kentucky, who are going to have the ball in their hands as well. And we know he can do off the dribble, but what are you thinking off the spot up, off the catch, off handoffs? Where do you kind of see him playing that type of role at Kentucky? And do you see it working out, honestly?
I don't know. That's the $1 million question because they have so much talent. You have so many guys that could possibly be lottery picks if everybody's healthy and plays together. At Kentucky, you're going to sacrifice a lot, so you're not going to get really big numbers. And Kentucky's a team that traditionally doesn't shoot a lot of three-pointers as a team. So he could be hidden as far as like as a shooter, and he may not really need to shoot a lot of jumpers because the team is so talented, especially if they get all their pieces together, which it doesn't look like that's going to happen at the start of the season. But there is some concern there. I mean, I can see how someone can say, well, I don't know if he can be this because the shooting numbers haven't been like really, really great, in the past. But I think it's something that is easily fixable. And I think that you're going to see him play a role where he had a good, I think they had a scrimmage last night where he had like 17 points. But when I looked at the clips, I didn't really see a lot of jumpers. He was just scoring off cutting to the rim, transition, getting to the basket. So he may not need to shoot a lot of jumpers anyway.
Yeah, fair enough. And I think that'll definitely lead to some success. He has great size, kind of playing the 2-3. So it'll be interesting to see how they utilize him. I mean, kind of pivoting the conversation more to the other guys on particularly the offense next year. With DJ Wagner, what are kind of your thoughts about him early? I haven't watched a ton of him. I've watched definitely more Edwards and some of the other guys that we'll talk about, but from my understanding, just a pretty complete score first guard. And do you see that kind of as his role for them?
I wouldn't call him complete because I think his jump shot is really concerning.
Okay.
He's a gifted scorer. Like he has all the natural scoring instincts you want out of a guy that is labeled as a scorer. He's crafty. He's a righty, but he plays lefty. Like if you notice, all his drives are with his left hand. I mean, he just has those instincts and the scoring arsenal. Like he's a guy that I feel like when I watch him, I don't see a player that did a lot of training with a trainer. He's not robotic. Like you can tell that he's been playing one-on-one. He's been playing a lot of games where he was able to try different things.
Own his craft.
Yeah, because there's a lot of guys I feel like they just train, and then they only play games that matter, whether it's AAU, high school games. And so when you're playing games, you may not have the opportunity to freestyle and try and work on different things. He just seems like he's been playing pickup at the Y, at the park against grown men. It's just giving him these different instincts and feel that comes with just playing and being able to try different things. And so the concern with him is just the outside shooting. I think he's an okay passer. I think he can develop into a serviceable passer. But I'd say the outside shooting is a little bit concerning. And while he does have a quick step, he's not like this phenomenal athlete, which I think can be overrated at times. And he doesn't have like great size. But I mean,
6'3" isn't terrible. I mean,
it's not terrible, but I just wonder like what he really measures out at the combine. Like if he ends up being, if he even goes, well, I think you have to go to the combine this year. But if he's like 6'1" 3/4, that wouldn't stun me either. So I'd say he's more 6'2" than 6'3".
Yeah. On the lower side.
Yeah.
I hear you. Kind of moving on to that, like you're talking about playing Y and playing pickup. There's nobody whose game reminds me more of pickup basketball. And today's, kind of young basketball landscape. Rod Dillingham has been just doing stuff like for me, the ultimate Rob Dillingham performances against the OTE. where he just kind of looked like he was literally at 24-hour fitness, hooping around in a wife beater and just, dropping guys off with hezzies and spin jumpers and just literally got in his bag. What are your thoughts about Dillingham, and what are kind of your anticipations of his role as a freshman? Because it seems like he's going to be kind of the odd man out. I think Bradshaw will get his time. I think if Visich is available to play, he'll probably make, some sort of small impact late in the season, I anticipate. But Dillingham's the guy that just Shepard's going to be able to fill in the spot up shooting and provide some of that. So I'm curious what you think Dillingham's role is going to be. How is he going to fit in with these veterans and this other incoming talent?
I don't know. it's a terrible answer to such a good
true, though.
question.
That's why I'm asking you.
Because one, you can't teach his offensive creativity. That is just so natural. His confidence is on 1,000. Like just think about if everyone in the world had his type of confidence and they applied it to whatever, whether it's starting a podcast, starting a clothing line, talking to women. You know what I mean? Like he's so confident in his skill level, which, a guy that is that confident in himself and is that gifted as a scorer, you're going to have to take the good with the bad. And the bad is, he may take a triple crossover, step back hezzy with 20 seconds left on the shot clock. But he's the most exciting player to watch from just a pure entertainment standpoint. So I think his situation is really going to be interesting. I think he could be the wild card in the draft simply because he didn't have like a great global jam when they went to Toronto earlier this summer. And I heard Calipari say that other schools were calling him, telling him to transfer. And I'll be honest, I wasn't a person that felt like going to Kentucky was best for him. And the reason I say that is because
they're stacked.
One, they're stacked, which plays a part in they don't necessarily need him. So if he starts taking like some wild shots and Cal benches him, they can still win games and win the SEC tournament. So he is going to have to play the way that Calipari wants him to play. I wish he would have taken like the Trae Young route where you go to, like a Power 5 school, but you go where you have like the keys and if you go 0 for 5 taking bad shots, the coach is going to call a timeout, maybe yell at you, but you're getting back in. At Kentucky, you may not get
I like
back
the TJ Jackson thing going to South Carolina.
And that was probably like the worst case of it because South Carolina didn't win. And you look at it, there's other factors to it. It didn't.
We both know how we feel about GG. And he'll get his time.
I hope so. I hope
a whole
so.
nother podcast. That's for a whole nother podcast that we can do. 45
Yeah.
minutes just on GG Jackson. But kind of talking about the other guys on that roster, I just have to ask about what your thoughts are on Adu Thiero. Recently he's been listed at 6'8", and just not necessarily from a production perspective, but a long-term development of a player who, I think there's two scenarios for him that I kind of see in my head. He ends up being like this all-round kind of impact player, develops into a strong wing defender with that size. And, the three-point shot is slowly coming along, especially off the catch. But what I see, is kind of his other alternative is he could just be one of these guys who goes to Kentucky for 4 years, similar to a Shibwe, and it helps them win a lot of games. So, I see only positive things for him. And I want to hear your thoughts kind of about him as like a long-term prospect, either in college or in draft circles.
It's tricky because Kentucky's definitely not the school, in my opinion, you go to if you're a long-term guy, because every year you know that your replacement could be there. You know what I mean? Like,
he plays so hard, it's tough to not give him minutes. And because he does the things that impact winning. And I think only as he gets taller now to 6'8", his positional versatility just goes through the roof again. Because he was already able to guard 1 through 4, and now you can make a legitimate argument that he's a positionless defender if he can bring it all together. He definitely has the athletic tools, has the point guard background, the growth spurt that everybody loves. I just see a lot of checking boxes for maybe him being a huge breakout player. Maybe not on the box score, but in terms of just on the court, like what he does to impact winning. I think it could be a big year for him, and he could have, a pretty good offseason with a solid combine.
Yeah, I mean, all right, if everybody's healthy, let's say at the end of the season.
They get Bradshaw back, they get Onyesu back. Zvonimir comes in midway through the season, similar to the Bob Miller thing. Maybe he plays a little bit better because I think he's, more plug and play, because I think his vertical spacing is underrated. They don't need to be a premier shot blocker. I think if you build a team around that, and Adu Thiero is your fourth best guy, I like his chance to go to the combine. What do you think, Julian? Trying to get a word in.
I mean, do you think that there's a way that they maybe decide, you know what, like he's got guard skills and he's 6'8", why don't we just put him at the wing? I mean, their wing depth is kind of looking a little bit weaker, and they've got this logjam at guard. It might be a situation where like they kind of slide.
If Edwards is a guard, I would anticipate they would play 3 guards.
Yeah, if Dillingham plays like he's played so far in the preseason, Wagner's playing regardless, so that's 2. And then Edwards, so that's 3. Yep. And then
can we play him at the 4?
Well, you still got the guy from West Virginia, Trey Mitchell. He's going to play.
He's a hooper, no doubt.
So then you have the 3 bigs. So somebody's going to be upset. Somebody's probably going to transfer at the deadline. Not the deadline, at the semester. Somebody's probably, I don't know. It's like somebody's going to play early and then get DNP CDs by January. It's going to be interesting. There's a lot of overlapping skill sets, and
there's just so much talent there.
There's so much talent. There's somebody on that team that is a first-round pick on multiple boards that is not going to play.
Yeah.
And if everybody's playing and scoring like 6 points per game, 8 points a game. That makes what's that?
It's quite a conundrum. Like it definitely. That's why I phrased the the long-winded thought experiment, because there's so many different routes for this Kentucky roster. With that, I think a lot of them though lead to success. I think the talent's absolutely there. I guess I could pick your brain about Visich for a second and Bradshaw, because I think both of them add kind of an element of, actual spacing, because both of them have a somewhat capable jump shot. We'll see what both of them look like on an NCAA court and against NCAA talent. But, there's some belief there that they definitely are going to have the space in the front court that adds a new element that we haven't really seen at Kentucky.
If Calipari lets them shoot. Statistically, whether you agree with it or not, statistically, Karl Anthony Towns is the best shooting big man in NBA history. The numbers are actually better than Dirk's. And Cat wasn't shooting 3.
Back to the basket big.
Yeah. So, the game has changed, and you can make a case to say Kentucky's offense is old and it hasn't changed a lot.
I've watched a lot of Wisconsin basketball, so I'm here. I understand.
Yeah, so shout out to Chucky Hepburn.
That's my guy. I mess with Chucky. I saw a scrimmage. They look great. That kid Nolan Winter is going to be a stud.
Okay, well, I remember where I heard it first. But yeah, man, it'll be interesting just to see if Calipari lets guys on the team let it fly from deep, because if Bradshaw's able to shoot a lot of threes and Visich is. Imagine like the floor spacing Rob Dillingham has.
And Wagner and Edwards, they're all going to be able to get the ball to their spots at the elbow. All 3 of them can attack the basket.
Yeah.
I just think there's a lot that they can do. And then they have Onyesu, who's just kind of your classic Kentucky big man who's going to rim run. And he looks like he added some muscle to his frame. Looks like he's in really good shape. So I don't know. I think it could be a really strong year for Kentucky. I think they're one of the deepest teams in the country. And I think there's a pretty strong argument for that just through, the guys that we worked through. Any thoughts?
Play devil's advocate. They might have too much talent. I think there's a such thing as too much talent.
We've seen it in the past.
And everybody knows when you go to Kentucky, you're going to have to sacrifice your individual stats. But man, like what happens if everybody's like, hey,
Devin Booker was a 6-man. Devin Booker was a 6-man.
Yeah.
Sure.
But even then, I think that was stupid because he was playing behind the Harrison twins. But yeah, I just wonder like how does the NIL, the transfer window affect teams that are really, really deep like that? Because like Dillingham said, schools were calling him after, a summer tournament, like, hey, transfer, you're not going to play. So I can see a situation where first game somebody's not getting the minutes that they thought they struggle, and then all of a sudden all the other schools are going to send out feelers, and it's going to be interesting how things are going to work out with Kentucky.
Yeah, and I think that goes for really all of the country now. This transfer portal being such a huge element. I mean, I went through and looked at almost every transfer in the entire country this offseason. And it's just me and Julian were talking about pre-pod is just it's astonishing how much inter conference transferring there is. A lot of guys just saying, I was here for 3 years, hypothetically at Auburn. Florida seems a lot nicer this year, and a lot of situations where it looks like that. So I don't know. I think it'll be a consistent factor going forward. It's just an element of team building is what I called it to Julian, and now in college basketball.
No, it's crazy because I actually had, it's the honest to God truth, a coach from a Power 5 school asked me for my big board. And I'm thinking like, why do you want my NBA, my draft big board? And he's looking for the guys who are at the bottom of my big board who may not get drafted that he believes can transfer or that would be interested in transfer. So he said he's looking for
it's valuable.
Kaluma. He's looking for a guy like Kaluma. Remember, Kaluma was a guy that everybody thought was the, first round pick last year. What's that?
Grant Nelson's another great example that we could kind of talk about.
Well, Grant wasn't on like preseason draft boards. He kind of came in late, but the guy was looking for someone who's on a preseason draft board who may have a season where he doesn't make that jump and then he wants a new situation. I'm like, dang, that's crazy. But hey, that's the world we're in.
It's interesting scouting angle, I would say.
Yeah.
I guess I kind of name drop, but I kind of want to pick your brain about Grant Nelson and Jarn Stevenson and Rylan Griffin for Alabama and what you kind of think about those guys. I think Rylan's definitely a stretch and somebody that I'd like to see make a lot of improvements. But, I mean, I was watching Jarn Stevenson tape again today, and the thought of him pairing with Grant Nelson at some point, hopefully full time in that front court, is really intriguing with all the little things they can do with the ball in their hand. And I think that if there's consistent shooting around them, Alabama could be another good team again next year. Even though they're Brandon Miller-less, I still think that they have the punch. And Clowney was a decent loss as well, but I think that they brought in, two talents that could be hearing their name, said a lot in draft circles towards the end of the season. What are your thoughts on Nelson and Stevenson?
Yeah, very interesting combination there. So, Grant, I got to remember, I saw the box score from when they played TCU. I don't think he had a strong game. I did hear that he struggled a lot this summer during the pre-draft process as far as just not even like working out with teams, just working out with guys within WME and some of the pickup runs that they had.
Needs to put on some muscle.
Even then, I just don't know if he knows how to find his spots. Like when I was at the combine, when I watched him play at the combine, he just did not have any impact on the games. Like, but when you watch him like running up and down and like the athleticism drills, you're like, wow, this kid is special the way he moves. But I think for him and he's still kind of raw. Like I talked to like some people in his family and they're saying he still has a ways to go developing. The talent is there, but it's going to be a big spotlight on him. I remember talking to an NBA team about him last year, and the guy on the team was like, we don't have a big on our team that is athletic and finishes like that around the rim. So he's like, there's some intrigue there. And then just the way his summer went, it didn't go according to plan. And so now we'll see how he plays against SEC competition. And like I've been telling people, it's not a knock on him by any means. He blew up because of a KJ Pistons tweet on social media.
Had him on my pod a couple episodes ago. Brilliant.
Yeah, so Grant blows up for that. And then, when it happens, everybody's like calling me, like, have you seen this kid? I'm like, well, if you look at their schedule, they played Kansas and they played Arkansas. And I talked to some NBA scouts and they're like, I was at those games and I don't remember him. And so that's kind of similar to what I heard over the summer when he played in some pickup games against some talented guys. He just didn't know how to stand out and find a spot. So we'll see if that happens at Alabama. And as far as Stevenson,
He struggled a lot shooting the ball even at
I don't think the touch is. It's not there. It's not there at all. And maybe he can improve, but it wasn't there when I saw him at the combine. And then Stevenson, I actually saw him. I live in Dallas, and he came down to Dallas this summer, and I watched him and Gigi Jackson work out for like a week. I actually got some footage of them playing one-on-one.
Crazy because as I was watching him the first time, I was like, this is if Gigi Jackson combined his, on-ball creation with Jaren's athleticism, that'd be a dirty little combination of talents.
Yeah, I mean, I got the footage somewhere I was filming, but I watched him play one-on-one. And think about Stevenson, this man, his feet are like this big, and he doesn't look like he should move the way he does. I mean, he's obviously really young by reclassifying up. And I've heard from people around the program that they think he could have a Clowney type year, if not even better. But I've heard good things about him. And then as far as Ryland is a guy
better than Noah Clowney does. He can definitely get to his own spots on the perimeter.
Yeah, I think he has more offensive creativity than Clowney.
100%.
I don't maybe like
flair.
Shooting.
A little bit more flair.
What's that?
A little bit more flair. He's got a little bit more flair in his game than I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, I did feel like he settled for too many jump shots. I feel like he could have really punished high school seniors or high school players if he like played inside a little bit more. I did think he settled a lot, but I mean, the talent is there for sure.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any thoughts on Ryland Griffin?
Yeah, Ryland's the Dallas guy. I mean, been watching him play forever. He played on the same team as Casey Wallace in high school. Then I was going through some film of games that I filmed. Him, Keontae George, and Jordan Walsh on the same team for Drive Nation a few summers back. I've heard Ryland is supposed to have like a really, really big year. I mean, his shooting splits weren't good at all last year. They were pretty bad. But I've heard like some people saying that he's one of the guys that's going to have a breakout year. And I know it's a scrimmage, but he didn't play well. And I didn't see the game. Just looking at the stat sheet, which is not necessarily always fair, but looking at the stat sheet, he didn't have a strong game against TCU in a scrimmage. And so he's someone that I'll definitely be watching and paying attention to because I think he is expected to have a huge jump this year. And we'll see with an expanded role, especially if the shooting translates because the numbers weren't good at all last year.
Yeah.
I watched a bit of him to try and get a read. I think it's a strength thing because he's short on a lot of jumpers. When he goes to the rim, he kind of struggles. He either makes a great dish or when he tries to go up and doesn't go up strong enough and either gets a shot altered, blocked, gets blown up on screens a lot. Like if he put on weight this year, I think he's poised for a breakout year. But if he didn't, I think it's going to be a struggle because those issues are still going to be there. Like
yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, I definitely like his ability to get to his spots at times. Like Julian said, though, there is some desire to have him finish plays a little bit better. Talked about the shooting splits already. That'll kind of bring me to a conversation that I wanted to have about Florida because I kind of feel like they got an underrated roster coming into this season. They were a team that kind of cooked in the transfer portal, in my opinion, and brought in 3 transfers in Walter Clayton Jr., Zion Pullen, and Micah Hangladen from Marshall. Specifically the backcourt. With Clayton and Zion, what is kind of your thoughts offensively? Because to me, they both pop as guys who are really efficient at getting their own shot, really efficient off the catch as well. And I feel like it's kind of a perfect storm with the big like Hangladen, in the pick and roll actions with both those guards who can get downhill and both are willing passers and efficient passers at that. I'm pretty sure Zion's assist to turnover ratio was 1.63 Was getting near a point per possession with really, really high volume at UC Santa Barbara or UC Riverside. UC Riverside, yeah.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with I'm sure you've watched Clayton, but did you get a chance to watch a little bit of Poland last year?
I did. I mean, the numbers were great.
Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, the tape's even better, man. He creates space like nobody.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, it's going to be a big adjustment up to SEC play. I mean, I still think Riley Kugel is the guy on that team,
100%.
and they're going to have to, or they should, in my opinion, play around him. They got some scoring. I just wonder how the pieces fit because they got talent, but it's a matter of.
It's another team I think is going to be running a 3-guard lineup.
I was gonna just ask that. You think
Yeah.
it's 3 guards, or or if you had to pick between Pullen and and Clayton, like which one would you say is gonna get the nod out of those two if they do run just 2 guards?
I think Clayton will get the nod, but I'm curious to see what you think.
I'm gonna go Pullen.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for in my heart.
I'm with that actually. I like Pullen a little bit
I
better.
can see Clayton getting the nod to start the year, and I think, but over time, I mean, Pullen has that, kind of it might win that battle of attrition because I think his size as a guard pops. He's a good rebounder. Was able to get 18, 4, and 4 last year on obviously the great shooting splits. High assist to turnover ratio. So I'm curious to see if he can hold up playing defensively mostly because I think he's going to be able to get his shots. The amount of space that he created, in a lower conference, I'm still confident that he's going to be able to get to some of those spots, and he's always been able to knock down shots. So I thought it was a fun team though. Did you get to watch much Hangland?
Yeah, I mean, I watched some of this film. I mean, I think that I don't know. He could end up being like their 4th leading scorer. that wouldn't surprise me at all, especially with a lot of guards. I just think if I'm a big and I don't know if I'm a big, I'm going to put myself on a team where I know there's a table setter and a playmaker. that's going to give me open looks, and so I wonder how does it impact him because I don't. Like I said, he could be their 4th option, which I mean, Florida could be good, but
there's a lot of rebounds to get on that team.
It's definitely a lot of rebounds to get. But I just don't think college guards do a good job of feeding bigs anyway. So I mean,
entry pass is a lost art.
What's that?
The entry pass is a lost art.
I mean, we saw a 16 seed Fairleigh Dickinson beat a team because they couldn't put entry passes into Zach Edey. So like that's the proof is a lost art.
I actually kind of tweeted about it a couple of days ago. But yeah, I mean, you look at Derek Lively. I mean, he just knew he wasn't getting the ball at Duke last year. So far in the NBA, his numbers, I mean, his scoring numbers are way better than they were at Duke through like 4 games.
Mm-hmm.
Just because he has someone that can feed him the ball. I mean, obviously the spacing's better, but it's just college lineups are weird to me. You got teams that are playing 2 bigs. It's almost like teams are recruiting and they're recruiting talent, but not like the team, like how guys fit and how the pieces work together.
As me and Julian have been kind of working through the country, there's like a lot of very like discrepancies and it's mostly conference to conference and how the teams are constructed, where it's very clear that like, we just did the Big Ten. It's very clear a lot of these teams are now constructed to stop a team like Purdue because, the Zach Edey threat is imminent. So a lot of teams are getting bigger. We saw Michigan State go out and really beef up their front court by getting Booker and Carr. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of takes place in this conference. As I think, this has now kind of become a revolving door conference of players. It feels like at times we're talking about a different, 10 top players in the SEC every year, where some of these guys, now at Duke are even sticking around. Is there anybody, maybe it's Jaron, maybe it's one of the Kentucky guys. Do you see any of these guys maybe being a second year declaration player, maybe go back to school with, or transfer to a school within the conference or out of conference? Do you think it's one of those Kentucky guys? Like a Dillingham, maybe he comes out as a sophomore after going somewhere else.
So unpredictable. Like every time I think I have an answer to that Kentucky situation, another one comes and says, "No, that's not going to happen." I don't know. I mean, I'm just going to take a wait and see approach, but I just can't imagine all of those mouths being fed this season. So it's we haven't even talked about Antonio Reeves.
He's still there.
He's still there. He was their leading scorer. He's their leading returning scorer, right?
Yep, and he's got to get minutes, so somebody's got to sit out.
Yeah, and I always feel like there were the rumors that he were going back to Illinois State. For him to come back, there had to have been some type of promise. Not saying promises are always fulfilled, but they had to re-recruit him as if he were, a new player. And so he comes back, which kind of shocked a lot of people. And he's not even being talked about. And like I said, if I remember correctly, he was like their leading returning scorer.
And he's been playing well.
He had like 16 a game last year. I think he was the SEC Sixth Man of the Year or something like that, or
yeah, something or rather, he was definitely highly regarded last year as a staple of their core. So, great point. So that factor still weighs in. That's why I raised the Dillingham thing, because like I agree with what you said earlier. He could be the odd man out pretty early, I think, and I don't see it maybe turning around with some of these other situations where guys could get a later opportunity in the year. Like I think there will be an open door for Theo to make an impact throughout the year because he does the little things. So that's kind of my perspective on that. A guy that I kind of want to pivot the conversation while we still have you. A guy that me and Julian liked a lot last year. Early in the season, kind of along the same vein as I told you early last year, I was really high on Damon Collins. Obviously, it didn't work out, like I hoped. But a guy that kind of presents similar traits and maybe a little bit more upside. Unfortunately, had a bad knee injury last year for Arkansas early in the season. But what are your thoughts on Trevon Brazil's hopeful bounce back season? And maybe his upside as a potential, draft prospect. Because I kind of see a lane with L. Ellis and Keon Menafield, who are guys that are going to come in and move the ball. And we're kind of talking about, not setting up big man as much. He's somebody that just in transition creates so many easy points off of lobs, and getting outlet passes and running down the floor hard.
I have him as a first round pick. I think he is a guy that can be your vertical lob threat, just your athletic big that teams value. But I think there's real promise as a floor spacer and 3-point shooter. I forgot the numbers. They're actually pretty good, if I'm not mistaken. It was a small sample size.
Early in the year last year, he was shooting almost around 40%.
Yeah, that was a small sample size. And I didn't watch him much as a freshman at Missouri, but I did have someone reach out to me. It's like, hey, pay attention to this kid. And it was an agent that thought they had him. And then he kind of blew up at the end of the season. And then Arkansas came in the picture. And now,
he had that one dunk where he just kind of lit the drop world on fire for about 48 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. And he was coming off the bench, if I'm not mistaken. He was even starting. And so
the Mitchells.
Yeah. Hopefully he's I heard he's healthy, but you just never know with the knee injury. It's just the part about, and I've never been hurt like that before, but just trusting your knee and being able to play, just getting over the mental hurdle. But I've heard that he's looked well. I've heard that he's gotten better as a shooter because pretty much he was limited to working on his shooting. And so I think he's going to have a big year. Like I have him as a first round pick on my latest big board.
Great. That's what I was kind of hoping to hear as a Trevon Brazil stan. I only want the best for him. Obviously, it was kind of a downtrodden situation when that went down. Any closing thoughts on the SEC, and then we can probably let you go. I know you got other things to take care of today.
Yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts on Riley Kugel? I'm high on him. I think he's a top 14 guy.
Yeah, I like him as a possible lottery guy. I think the two-way versatility is definitely there, and he'd probably be able to make an impact early. I'm just not a huge guy on shot creators, and I think if he can really prove himself as a secondary playmaker, like we were talking about with Florida, for them to be really effective, he really, like you said, he needs to assert himself as the leader of that team. Even though they brought in these two upperclassmen guards that performed excellently last year at both the places they were at. So, obviously with Walter Clayton at Iona, I believe, and I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I think that he's one of those guys where we're looking at, roles and who's getting the shots. It could be, it could come down to that for him. I think in the mainstream, but I think, people like yourself are going to wait and see till what he looks like in the combine and see how he stacks up at the end of the day against all this talent. I think that's where he thrived last year late in the process. And, it'll be interesting to see what the season looks like for them. Like I wanted to bring them up because I think that they're going to be a fun team to watch and somebody to watch for in March.
Yeah. No, he had a good second half of the season. And shooting, I'm just intrigued by the shooting. And he's if you look at his numbers, like the deep dive in the numbers, he shot it equally well off the dribble and off the catch. And the athleticism is there. Was a little wild.
Pullen's another one of those guys. I did a little stats deep dive on him around New Year's, and he was shooting better off the dribble than off the catch. He was shooting like 50% on jump shots off the dribble. So it's a nice dynamic that they put on there. Great stat nod.
Yep.
Julian, any thoughts on Kugel, or do you have any closing notes or questions while we have Rafael here?
Dude, Kugel's a guy I got to get in the tank on and watch all the film on because he's one I'm behind on. But Raf, I'm a big Justin Edwards guy, so I'm really happy that you're on the same boat as I am. Justin Edwards should be a top 5 pick. I wish we had more time to talk about transfer stuff. We'll get you back for that another time, I'm sure. But other than that, no questions, man. It was good to get to hear what you got to say about this Kentucky team with too many cooks in the kitchen.
I got a lot. I got a lot of guys. But yeah, man, just we can set up another interview sometime during the season, and
we'd love to have you on to talk more prospects nationwide at some point when you have the time, of course.
All right, yeah, definitely the international guys, because I plan on going and seeing quite a few of them in person. I already saw Risa Share. I'm going to see Tijan Salon next weekend.
Here's another guy I just added to my board now that I'm done with all my NCAA player gathering and board building there. Now I'm moving out to the national, so I'll be curious to see what you have on him. Do you have any written work coming up or anything we can drop links to or plug?
Yeah, I have a Nicola Topic article that I'll publish it.
Probably my number one guy, Rafael, right now.
Next 10 minutes on your board period.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with that at all. Especially the way he's been playing. So yeah, I'll publish that.
Him and Sar, 1A, 1B.
Yep.
Right now. That'll be very interesting. But yeah, so that's it. Then I got the Big Board podcast every day, and I hadn't really wrote a lot over the last, I guess it's been a month and a half, but I have a bunch of articles coming out soon now, like college basketball and G League is about to start up.
Mm-hmm. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to seeing everything put out this year, of course. I'll keep all your links in the description, and we thank you again for your time.
Yep, no problem. Thank you for having me on.
Yep, take care.
All right, thank you.
Great little guest appearance there by Rafael. Thanks to him again for making the time to hop on for a bit. It was a great conversation. We definitely got a lot longer than I thought we would, which is awesome because I had, a plethora of questions. Kind of talking about the rest of this conference. We really covered a lot of the bases with Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Kentucky. What are kind of your thoughts on the rest of the landscape? And what are you kind of seeing the hierarchy being, Julian, of this conference?
I mean, we touched on Arkansas a bit at the end there with Rafael, but I think Arkansas is going to be really good. Like Alabama for sure, Kentucky for sure, I think are going to be the 2 best teams in the conference. But I think at least Arkansas should be really, really good.
Auburn and sleeper.
I was going to say, Auburn is another one as well. Florida should be interesting. I think, honestly, it's not quite as deep of a conference as it was last year, just because There's a lot of teams.
LSU's kind of in shambles. Mississippi's kind of in shambles. Mississippi State's kind of in shambles.
So is Missouri. I mean, like,
kind of in shambles. Georgia's been in shambles. They brought in RJ Melendez, which was a good get.
yeah.
But
Vanderbilt's not great. South Carolina is still not great.
shout out Ben Allen Lubin from coming over from Notre Dame. He's a player that I really like draft prospect wise. We didn't get to talk about him with Rafael, but one player that I wanted to bring forth to kind of do a discussion at some point was Keyshawn Murphy. I placed some of his film in front of Julian. He was razzing me for the jump shot. But I mean, if you go watch this kid's tape and you say, okay, the jump shot smooths out, he adds a little bit more strength to his body, works on the form a little bit more. It's clearly something new that he's added to his game. Shot it around, 28% last year on 1.3 attempts per game.
Well,
the rest of his game is very his floor is very low right now, but his ceiling could be solidly high as an impact role player, especially in the next 2 years at Mississippi State. I think if he makes any sort of jump this next year, he's the best big coming off their bench or even their starting 4 or 5, and he's making an impact as a shot blocker / rebounder. And that ability to stretch the floor is only going to elevate kind of the perspective that people are going to have on him.
Well, here's the thing with Keyshawn Murphy. Like, if you watch everything except the jumper from 3, he looks phenomenal. Like, he can hit turnaround J's from the mid-range, pull-up J's from the mid-range. His footwork is phenomenal on both ends of the floor. You can see him switching on to smaller players, reading pick-and-roll situations well, and making the right decision. You can see him sticking with guys on the dribble, swiveling his hips to get back and forth to avoid getting beat there. There's a lot to like outside of that 3-point jump shot, and I think it's exciting the fact that he was a willing shooter. Because we've seen guys like Oscar Tshiebwe or Hunter Dickinson in the past, and Drew Timme for a while, kind of like say, you know what, I can't shoot the 3. Mid-range is going to be kind of as far as I'm willing to go. Even DeAndre Ayton, But the fact that Murphy, he was a sophomore last year, was he not?
Yep, sophomore.
As a sophomore, he said, you know what, maybe it won't look good, but I'm gonna at least try and extend my range this year, and hopefully it pays off in the long run. I think that's a big deal.
And so he was low on reps. I mean, only played in 18 games, and was still able to get 1.1 steals and blocks combined. I mean, his per 40 statistics would probably be pretty decent. Shot 65% from the line, not the greatest splits, but shot 60% from the field overall. I just think not a bad guy to keep an eye on. 1.36 assist to turnover ratio. So clearly not where that's going to be making mistakes for you.
I think another thing that's important to kind of take note of in that conference as well is there's a lot of very, very tall, very slow guys coming into the conference, right? Ivisic moves well for a big, but he's not going to be able to keep up with Keyshawn Murphy. Let's be honest. You brought in Connor Vanover in Missouri. You brought in Mississippi. They just brought in Jamarian Sharp. Hanglotten as well. There's a lot of tall, slow, not so mobile big guys who Keyshawn Murphy, if he can pump fake a jump shot, is going to abuse off the dribble. I think that's another really exciting thing to watch for with him this year.
Yep, I think that if he gets more reps, then it could be an interesting display for him. I just hope that he gets the opportunity. That's what it comes down to with a lot of these guys. I'm kind of shooting, as Chuck from Chuck and Darts would say, I'm chucking my dart at him being a solid college basketball player. Mississippi is a team that's pretty interesting to me because they brought in such a variety of talent. Bringing in Brandon Murray from Georgetown, who I liked a lot last year. Bringing in Musa Cisse from Oklahoma State. Bringing in Jamarian Sharp from Western Kentucky. Bringing in, even bringing back Matthew Morrell is a huge thing. Bringing in Alan Flanagan from Auburn. I think they have a lot of talent, and I think that they could be one of these teams that build themselves like an actual good roster through the portal. I think we saw it with a team like Xavier and the Big East. Me and Pistons Draft Talk were talking about is they built a nice little filthy lineup just strictly through the portal. And I think that we might see this experiment take place here in the SEC with Mississippi.
Yeah, I mean, I'm shocked that they were able to keep both Merle and TJ Caldwell. Shocked. Like I figured it was pretty for sure. I thought Merle was going to go somewhere else, but I would not have been
It
surprised.
wasn't Xavier, it was Villanova. Bringing
Okay.
in TJ Bamba, Tyler Burton, Lance Ware, and bringing back Eric Dixon. Similar vein.
Yeah. Like there's a couple of guys that I'm do they still have what's his freaking name? I can picture the freaking dude. Former Texas coach. You know what I'm talking about. I'm blanking on names today. Um I'm I think with Ole Miss, it's going to be kind of a case of their front court getting sorted out. Because with Merle and Caldwell, their backcourt's fine. Like we know what those guys can do.
Beard.
Chris Beard, that's who I was thinking of. Yes. And Chris Beard at Tech was a big transfer portal guy as well. So I'm not surprised that his aim to rebuild Ole Miss is to say, Matt, TJ, like we're gonna bring in the works for you guys. Stay here, and I'm sure we can do something. I don't think they'll be quite as good as the top tier of the
Cameron
SEC.
Barnes was a good get. Rashad Marshall is going to be a decent player. So it'll be interesting to see how those freshmen are incorporated too. I've heard good things about Cam Barnes out of Duncanville. So it'll be interesting to see how they kind of dive into the fold. Another team that I like to kind of that brought back important players is LSU bringing in Damian Collins. From Kentucky, bringing back a guy in Jalen Reed and Tyrell Ward, who are guys that I'd like to see kind of get more touches, get more playing time over the next couple seasons. And then bringing in Jalen Cook was a huge get for them.
Yeah,
From Tulane.
They had a phenomenal transfer portal. Their front court looks really, really good right now. I really liked Jalen Ward. Wait, which one is the four? Jalen Reed. I'm sorry, I got mixed with Tyrell Ward and Jalen Reed. Jalen Reed is phenomenal, and I think that he is going to be him and Damian Collins in the front court is going to be devastating in transition for a lot of teams next year. And I think they've brought in some depth now. And look, I don't think again like there's a lot of these teams like it's kind of a wait and see thing just because the transfer portal is so chaotic. But I do think like the LSU's, the Ole Misses, the Mississippi States, like they're not going to be up there with Kentucky, Alabama, and Arkansas. But I think they'll still be teams that like at the end of the season are going to have like 8, 9, 10 losses and be at least a challenge in the conference tournament and a tough out in the NCAA. And I don't like I said, the SEC last year was outrageously deep with talent top to bottom. And obviously Tennessee is still there, who we haven't even talked about yet. But I don't think it doesn't have the same pop this year that it did last year. But I still think as a whole, like there's still enough teams in this conference that are have retooled enough that it's going to be competitive.
I agree. I think that there's so many teams that are retooling. And another team that retooled a little bit was Tennessee. Getting in Dalton Knecht, who's been a firecracker so far for them in the preseason with some of their scrimmages. He looks like he's going to be the type of player that could lead them to some promising performances. The 13th ranked transfer in the country out of Northern Colorado. Brought in JP Estrella, who's a top 100 recruit. Brought in Cameron Carr, who's a top 100 recruit. Cade Phillips is a good player. Brought back Josiah Jordan James. Brought in Jordan Gainey from South Carolina upstate. They have a solid roster, and I think that they could be another team to watch out for that's also retooling.
Yeah, their style of play in the past has been a bit concerning. I still have questions about what they can really do offensively.
It's gonna be all about the connect, baby.
Yeah, I mean they're gonna put a lot into Dalton Knecht because last year they were a pretty woeful offensive team for the most part. They hung their hat on defense, which I think they'll be able to do again this year. Vescovy is going to kind of have to be their 3-point shooter. So we'll see. I always underrate Tennessee going into the season. This is like a yearly thing at this point that I don't think they're ever going to be like outrageously good, and they're always better than I expect. So what they have on paper looks like it should be decent. I don't love the front court depth they've got going on right now, and that might be a concern, but they've got a lot of wing depth, which can kind of override that in a sense just because of the positional mismatches that they create.
I agree. Kind of round things out here overall. Who is your player of the year pick in the conference, and who's your dark horse?
My player of the year pick in the conference. Oh,
I'll give you mine first if you want.
I want to say Justin Edwards so badly. I'm just gonna say Justin Edwards. I've been a Justin Edwards guy. I think he's gonna have an outstanding season. Maybe I may be overhyping him a bit. I don't care. I love the kid. Go PA. Imhotep born.
Fair enough. I mess with it. For me, I think I'd have to go. Rafael said it. I think I might have to go Riley Kugel because I just think if he pops, he'll have the most output and could have a great year. Other than that, I'd probably go with Edwards. I think he'll be the guy that probably scores enough to get there. Sleeper pick for conference player of the year.
L. Ellis.
Somebody like L. Ellis could really do it.
Yeah.
Told you he reminds me a little bit of JD Note for them.
Yeah.
So he could be interesting. Who's your dark horse? I think the top three is pretty much going to be Kentucky, Alabama, Florida, or Arkansas.
One of the two. I'm going to go with Mississippi.
Mississippi. I like it.
It's the Chris Beard effect, man. I can't stand the man because he's an a-hole, but he knows how to coach a basketball team. And
I got hired again, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, even Missouri with some of the players they brought in is very similar to that with Hanover, Tamar Bates. And they brought in some good recruits, maybe a little bit better recruits than
Yeah, but they lost more. I mean, they lost Kobe Brown and DeMoy Hodge, which is
their guy. He's in the
Yeah.
intro. Out to DeMoy Hodge.
Yeah.
I wonder who's going to be in the intro this year. I wonder who's going to put up the tape that cuts together well enough. And we'll obviously have to find a new introduction song at the end of the year, but I wonder who's going to end up in the introduction for next year.
Rob Dillingham.
Rob Dillingham, 100%. We'll have one clip in there.
You know what? I didn't get to say this when Raph was on the pod, but you know who an interesting kind of like college career art comp for Rob Dillingham is Terquavion Smith.
That's what I wanted to say. That's crazy.
I was thinking
I wanted to say that he totally could do the Terquavion Smith where he just that's why I said, do you think he's a guy that sits back here maybe? And that was kind of what I wanted to get to, but I didn't want to compare him directly. I don't know why I didn't. That would have been a good call. Good podcasting, Julian.
Thank you, brother.
Ladies and gents, we're off the clock.